coming up on this episode of The Prodigal Life.
Oh, you don't understand our culture. We have machismo. You know, you have to be a man and you have to be tough and hold on. Like, shut up. What are you, an idiot? I mean, so does Jesus' teaching applies to everyone else except your culture?
Yeah, right.
Jesus didn't die for your culture. He died for everyone. We're all held to the same standard here.
Yes, amen.
So you have to transcend whatever cultural barriers are preventing you from the vulnerability.
My guardian angel is exhausted. He is exhausted. He is like laying on the tarmac going, oh God, please somebody make her sit down for just a little while because I'm tired.
Are you away from your faith?
Do you wonder why you're Catholic? Do you really want to know more?
If God is so good and he made a beautiful and amazing world, then why does life feel so messy and difficult and painful sometimes?
Do you feel stuck and want to take your faith to that next level? Join us on The Prodigal Life as me and Ellen and Nick have an honest and open discussion about all things important in our faith life. Welcome to The Prodigal Life. Hello and welcome back to The Prodigal Life. I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, and I'm joined by Ellen Holmes, Steeves-LeBlanc, and by Nick Torre.
I need a longer
of
name.
Awaken Catholic. Yeah. Before we get started today, just want to remind you about our website, prodigallife.com. On there, you will find previous episodes. You can go back and look at all the interesting things that we've spoken about. You can get some special, stuff on there, perks on there as well, and merch and everything. Boy, we got it going on, don't we? And then also you can go to our Patreon page as well. You'll see on there on the website, the light bearers we will serve, and you can decide what level you want to support us. And so glad when you do that, because one thing we're going to have that Ellen and I were talking about as well. We're going to have some special episodes just for you guys. Ooh, just for the patrons.
Spicy.
And I might put some incentives up there too myself and stuff too, just to keep you interested.
Okay.
So in addition to that, we also have the app.
Yes, we do. We have a really great app that works when nothing else in the world does. It's the Awaken app. You can go on your laptop or iPad or phone and go to the awakenapp.io and download it, or you can just go to your App Store, your Play Store, your Apple Store, and get the Awaken Catholic. It's 100% Catholic. There's podcasts, there's prayers, there's everything you need to do, and it's a safe place to message each other as well. You can set up really great messaging, and then there's a community forum where you can talk to other Catholics. So I really think it's a good thing for you to have, and especially for your family.
All right.
That's awesome. Good job.
Excellent.
You really nailed that plug. That was good.
Yeah. I love the app.
Covered the bases.
Yeah. I didn't know what I was saying. If you asked me what I just said, I wouldn't tell you. Well, no, I mean, a lot of times God talks for me or through me or whatever. I am not driving this bus.
Ooh. Well, at least he is.
I am not on the bus. I'm on the bus.
You're on the bus.
But I'm just in the back.
I like to say I keep my foot on the pedal, but I let him take the wheel.
Amen.
There you go.
That's
there
good.
You go. That's awesome.
I like that. That is very good.
So guys, today, we're going to talk about kind of a weird and potentially frightening, definitely somewhat cliche notion of hating God, right? A lot of the world's atheists, even the leading atheists, are not actual atheists. They're just people who hate God, which is not the same thing as not believing in God. Mm-hmm. To hate something, you have to believe in it. So I think that we're in a really interesting society. All societies, a sociologist might say, are interesting, but I find ours to be particularly interesting because with the advent of like modern technology and stuff, like never before have we really been able to be our own gods, right? And so we're almost like our own godhood, so to speak, is in competition in some sense with God's godhood over our lives, his lordship, his kingship. And so, when things are going great, it's easy to feel like, haha, I'm a heck of a god. I'm good at this thing called life. I'm in control. And then when things are going not so great, that's when it's real easy to remember, God, why are you letting this happen? Look up to the heavens and cry out to the actual God and say, hey, you're the one that's in charge. What's going on here? And so, even Jesus and, being fully divine and fully man, he cries out from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know?
Right.
And so let's talk about that in our lives. What does that look like? What has that looked like for us?
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy, because in Genesis 3, right, it says, you will be like gods, right? And God tried to prevent that by putting the tree in because it wasn't, the tree was there for two reasons. One, as a physical reminder of God's authority, right? I'm God and you're not. That tree reminds you of that. But it was also the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? God did not want us to experience evil, right? And so by using our free will to say no against God, then evil comes into the world, which causes death, right? Mavet means to cut yourself off from God's life. And so, but a lot of times we do it to ourselves, right? We cut God out of our lives and we want to blame God. I know for me, I don't think I ever abandoned God, but I was questioning God for sure, especially when you're younger. Why are you allowing this to happen to our family? And so my thing was fear. Like I said, I was afraid to get married, to make that commitment. My brother, who's just a year younger than me, his was anger. He goes, if I don't ever want to get married, if this is what marriage is supposed to be.
Wow.
And he never did get married to this very day. So the four of us responded differently to what was going on. But my reaction, I wasn't necessarily to blame God, but I was questioning God, like, why? Now, looking back in retrospect and perspective, it makes sense. I think the other piece of it was during the discernment periods, like, why would you have me in a monastery? Like this, almost my whole life on this track monastic, when all of a sudden you want me to be married? What the heck, God? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Now, there was a time there where I deliberately tried to put God in a corner. And it was right, because even after getting married, I still felt an attraction, a pull, which eventually was, I didn't know it was a deacon, because I didn't even know there were permanent deacons. Be honest with you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The only deacons I saw were guys going to be priests. I've never seen a permanent deacon. So I didn't understand what that was. Like, why am I married? This should be gone now, because I did what God said. He wanted me to get married. I got married. So I deliberately tried to cut that out. So I stopped praying the way I was accustomed to praying. I even stopped going to church for a while. I stopped going to mass because I said, I need to, whatever this needs to stop so I can focus on my marriage. I did not have the mechanism or the tools to be able to balance what I was experiencing, which was still this a tug and attraction that God was calling me to, which I thought was going to be fulfilled in marriage, but it wasn't. So I tried, in a sense, to kill it, So I deliberately stopped going to mass. I deliberately stopped. I mean, I wasn't thinking about, I'm immortal. So I was just thinking, whatever this is needs to stop, because it's going to interfere with my marriage.
Wow. So you didn't see how you could ever have the two in harmony.
No. I didn't see how I could harmonize those two things.
That's amazing.
So I thought one of the, and and sometimes that's a little bit of my personality. I'm either I'm all in, right, or it's nothing. So some of that is a personality flaw, I guess, within myself.
So what brought you back? When did you figure out, oh, gee, really, I have to go back to mass, and I've got to, how long were you away before you decided?
Well, I just wasn't going every week. It was like a sporadic thing.
Okay.
And we even went to, we had some friends there that were, not Seventh-day Adventists or Jehovah, something like that. We went to their service once, just to, not to join, but just to see,
Right.
It's just a strange time. But when we got to Oregon, and I discovered the diaconate is when that whole thing changed.
Wow.
As I said, wait a minute, I had no idea. Because when Father first mentioned, I'm like, a deacon? I was like, I can't be a deacon. I'm married.
Yeah.
He goes, no, permanent. Now, he's from Tanzania.
Right.
He had a heavy accent back then. He said, permanent. I didn't understand. I didn't know what word he was trying to say.
Right.
So he went in the sacristy, and he got the documents of Vatican II. He opened Lumen Gentium, paragraph 29. He said, read that. At the lower end of the hierarchy is the deacon. And I read it, I'm like, my goodness, that's what I'm supposed to do.
That's it.
And I knew that's what I was supposed to do. And I could be married, and then that's when everything started to change.
And then you started your prayers again and go and do church.
Yeah. Oh,
that's
amazing. In fact, I started all that when we moved back to Oregon.
I
got involved in the parish, because the parish that we got married in, joined that parish and started,
But it must have been hard, that separation because you've always been so connected from your whole life.
Yeah, it was.
That must have been
hard.
a really hard period.
It was hard because I was missing it.
Yeah.
But I felt like I can't manage these two things because I thought like maybe the pull would get so strong that I end up like, ooh, maybe getting married was the wrong thing to do. You know, I was
Right.
living in fear. Basically, is what I was doing.
Yeah.
I didn't have the tools to be able to discern God's voice. I did in the decision to be married or go back to the monastery, but then there was this new thing.
Right.
You know, I thought, okay, once I figured it out, it would stop, but it didn't. And I didn't know what this new thing was that was still pulling me and attracting me. So that's why I got scared. And what do you do when you're scared? You run.
You run.
So I ran away from God for a little while. But I ran away.
But I mean, that's what you had to do.
And you know,
because
that's
you
what
thought,
I did.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think a lot of people could probably something that came to mind for me hearing that was like the struggle that we can have to reconcile things about ourselves that we might not even fully understand, but like that we have this itch. We know there's something there about ourselves, whether it's like our identity. A lot of people get confused about their sexual identity, their gender, their the work that they're called to do with their lives. And they can know like, oh, there's this thing about me that is there, but how do I reconcile that with these other things? And like for you, it was as simple as something you didn't know, like the permanent diaconate, you know. And as soon as that was there, as soon as that little puzzle piece was there, it was like, oh, the rest of this actually makes sense now, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
That's
that for so many of us, it's like we lack formation, we lack catechesis, we lack. We lack an understanding, like, you know, you tell of who God is, right? His identity and some of the different characteristics of that identity. Like you tell someone, you know, God is like a father to us. He's our Father in heaven. He's our Father. Okay. Well, if someone's relationship with their father is screwed up, if their father treated them like crap,
They probably aren't really up for the father relationship.
right? And so that there's going to be a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of it is like we need to rebuild these ideas about like who God is and what the church actually teaches. And you know, like a lot of people say, it was a specific cardinal, I think, I can't remember his name now. He said that very few people actually hate the Catholic Church. They just hate what they think the Catholic Church says.
Yes.
Yeah. Sheen.
Yeah,
Fulton
exactly.
Sheen,
Yeah,
Venerable
Fulton
Fulton
Sheen.
Yes.
Sheen.
And I just think that that's so rampant, you know, like, gosh, if people had a clue what the church actually taught, like JP2's theology of the body, the catechism itself is so beautiful. The way it's articulated, the way that everything is worded is so beautiful. It tugs at the heart. It's not just some encyclopedia, you know. If we actually understood what the church is proposing for our lives, like what the church proposes our dignity is, how much we're each worth, you know, and how there really are answers to some of these difficult questions about our lives.
And that's why the devil is trying so hard and the powers that be to destroy the family.
Yes.
Because see, if they can break down your relationship with your father or your mother or the whole kit and caboodle, then why would you ever go seek God or the Blessed Mother or, you know, the family? I mean, if they make it so that it's not popular or they make it so that it's not something to be sought after, you know, and then they're told that they can be their own gods, like you were just talking about, so that they can create whatever looks like is good to them. Why would they go seek in Christ? Why would they seek a relationship with the Holy Family when they don't have any relation? So now we have all these broken homes, all these people that grow up in broken homes. I mean, at least you had contact with your parents. I mean, there are so many children running around the world today. They have no mom, or they have no dad, or they have, you know, they don't know, or they have multiple moms and dads, or they have two dads, or they have two moms, or, you know what I mean? And on and on and on. But in the back side of it, they don't know that the Father loves them and wants them to come home. And they don't know that there is a mother who went way beyond what most mothers would ever do for their child to save her child. I mean, I don't know how many mothers today would put their 15-year-old butt on a donkey to ride through the desert with an infant and no Pampers to go to another country where you don't speak the language, you don't know anyone, and you don't have anything to save her child. What? Now, that's a race I'd like to see on TV.
Yeah.
To me, that is a tough mutter. That would be like a mutter race I'd like to see. I'd like to see a bunch of 15-year-olds holding infant children riding across a desert with coyotes and wolves and, I mean, that's love. And it's not saying that there's anything wrong, that people don't love their children enough. That's not what I'm saying at all. All I'm saying is, before you discard something as, gee, I can't love my mother, or I can't love my father, or I had a really crappy relationship with my mother, it doesn't mean that there might not be another mother that loves you as much as she loved her son that she was willing to risk her life for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when you're spending your time blaming God or getting angry at God, easy target. Right? I mean, he's just out there somewhere,
right?
So you just, blame God. It's God's fault. It's God's fault. And like, for example, me trying to come to the grips of what fatherhood is. I had no idea what that looked like because I certainly was not in my family growing up. Had no idea of what fatherhood was. And in the monastery, the abbots takes the place of Jesus in the monastery, but he's kind of like aloof, so it's a little different thing. But when I'm married, it's like, what do I do? So my first thought was, do everything the opposite of what my father did. If I do that, then I'll be good. Okay. But it's deep. But it's deeper than that, And when things don't go right, it's easy just to blame God. He's a horrible father. He's a bad father. Again, because you're projecting your own human thoughts in your heart about your feelings about your earthly father onto God.
Correct.
But we have to get to a point where we understand that God's fatherhood transcends any earthly understanding of what fatherhood is, because parents fail. But God's love never fails.
That's right.
But to get to that point where you understand that in a deep way, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Amen.
It's very, very hard.
That's really, I think for me, I don't think I ever hated God. I think that I was, if anything, in periods of indifference, especially when I kind of straddled that line between agnosticism and atheism. I think that, if anything, I was more just indifferent, but I also feel like in that indifference, even before I got to that point in my journey where I would have considered myself agnostic or atheist, I think my willingness to hurt other people for my own gain, whether it's when I was womanizing or just all of the stupid bull crap that I did that hurt people, I think that in as much as every person, whether baptized or not, whether a part of, the family that is the church or not, every person is a little window into the craftsman, is God. Every person is a masterpiece of his creation, and is destined for divinity, destined for eternity.
Love it.
And every time that I was willing to selfishly hurt a person for my own gain, I was spitting in his face. I was in action hating him, even if I wasn't consciously doing so.
Yeah. Wow.
So that would be my personal response to that.
Yeah. That's a big. I would say was benign neglect. That's what I would be most guilty of. I don't know that I ever hated God. I know I hated myself. And I guess indirectly by hating myself, I definitely would hate God because God made me.
Right.
And God makes you in his likeness and image. He puts a part of himself inside every human being that comes onto the planet by giving you your soul. So, but for me, I would say it was benign neglect, because even though I didn't necessarily hate him, I didn't seek a relationship with him. I didn't want to know why he loved me the way he loved me. I didn't even really want to understand why he did. And it wasn't because I didn't love my father. My father's my hero. I idolized my father. I still idolize my father. He's just probably one of the kindest men, as far as I know, that ever walked the face of the planet. He's studying to be a third order Franciscan right now, which is just amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's 78 years old and he's going to become a third order Franciscan. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. But he, so it wasn't that I had daddy wounds. You know what I mean? It wasn't because I had daddy issues that I didn't want to know Jesus or God. And I actually knew who Jesus was and believed everything he said, but I didn't believe it at a level that it was part of the fiber of my being. It wasn't a soul love. It was just a mind, and the mind and the heart, it was severed. and they didn't connect. So did I abandon him? Oh, yeah, many times. But a lot of it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier, Deacon, about, if you don't know something is wrong, how do you know what I mean? And like, I love saying this out loud. My guardian angel is exhausted. He is exhausted. He is like laying on the tarmac going, oh God, please somebody make her sit down for just a little while because I'm tired. I went and got Reiki certified.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. No idea. My mother, astrology was a thing every once in a while. And I didn't know any of that was bad. But I never, even when I was doing it, I never did the Reiki Master thing. I did level 1 and 2, and I never went back. I never could make the time to go back. It's almost like God was like, okay, yeah. We're not doing that. You might think you're going to, but that's a no-no. And a lot of people don't even know that that's bad. But I can honestly say, I never thought it was me. I always thought it was through Christ. I mean, I knew it was God. I somehow innately knew that if I was able to help anyone, it was only because God wanted it. Mm-hmm. Even though God and I was living in mortal sin and doing a whole bunch of things I shouldn't have been doing, I never thought that I had the power to heal anybody. That was like, what? So when somebody told me I had to ask why Reiki was wrong and yoga and all this other stuff, I never did yoga either, which was weird. Every time I tried to do it, God was like, no, we're not going today. Not today. But, it was hard. So I don't know. I don't know that I abandoned him only in as much as I was benignly neglectful of seeking any type of understanding or relationship with him. I don't think I ever hated him.
But did you know you could have a relationship with God, though?
No. I didn't know he wanted to know me. And who would want to know me? I mean, the person I was and the life I was living? Who would want to know me? I mean, who would want to know me? And
I think a lot of people feel that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, there's a lot of people out there that's in that spot right now.
Yeah.
Who would want to love me?
Who would want to love me? Who would want to know me?
There's a thirstiness that manifests in just these over-the-top expressions, whether it's on TikTok, social media, or whatever. Like, if I showed this much cleavage, then people will want to know me. Then people will then I'll get some people's attention. If I do this dance, I'll get people's attention. And there's obviously, it's not just women that do this, but okay, I don't know, maybe men show cleavage too. I don't know, but I'm just saying, we do these, we have these outbursts of we are starving for people to be interested in us,
right? And attention and affirmation. We always want affirmation.
Yeah, look, they do things. See how many likes I can get.
Yeah.
If I do this crazy thing, look, I've gone viral. Yeah. And that's the achievement in their life. But
that's where their worth is.
That only lasts. Yeah. Until that feeling's over, now you got to get it. It's almost like drugs. Yeah. Once it feels over, you got to get another hit.
All it is,
you got to get. You got to do something
addiction.
else now.
It's a different form of addiction.
Even more extreme, so you can get more people to like you. Yeah. Than you did the last time.
Well, and I think chemically, it's been shown that it's more than just similar. It is, because the dopamine releases that we get and all the different chemical reactions that happen are super congruent to addictions to chemical substances.
It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the whole, that's how it's driven. It's driven so that we seek false gods.
Yeah.
And affirmation from the false god.
Yeah.
Which of course drives us away from even knowing that we could be loved.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened with me, because, the hole that I went into, it was a dark, deep dive, and it was pretty ugly. And I still would roam into mass. I still would go to church. My kids all three of my children went through they went to Catholic school. They did all their sacraments. We did all, even in the midst of what I was in the midst of, which was really dark and very, very terrible. I still did that. So there was this part of God that just wouldn't let go of me. God would not let me go. He was like, no, I'm going to keep chasing you. I'm going to keep going for you until you finally let me love you.
And I think the hard thing is for people watching or listening, there is literally nobody in existence or that has ever existed for whom that is not true. Yeah. God is so persistently and longingly pursuing each and every one of us and trying to bring us into his embrace at all times. He's never not trying to bring me, Nick Della Torre, even, president of Awaken Catholic, big deal. Like this guy that, has devoted his life to God. Like there are still ways in which I need to let God embrace me further, right? Like there's still ways in which I'm stiff-arming him. Like, God, you're my God, and I'll serve you and stuff. But this part of I'm good. I got this. He's for all of us, even if we've quote unquote arrived, which doesn't exist. Like he is always pursuing each and every one of us. And so, like if you're watching or listening, no matter where you're at in your journey, rest in confidence, knowing that like you are loved and desired by the God that created you and loves you and created you to be in relationship for you. He pines for you, right? He pines for all of us. And so you are desired, and you are worth so much to him. Like who gives a crap if other people have made you feel worthless? Because you were not designed for those people. You were designed for God and by him. And so I just felt convicted to share it.
No,
like
it's
I just
beautiful.
think that the stories that we're sharing in this podcast and in this show, like it's meant to be something that when you hear this, it's like, how does this apply in my life? Well, right now it applies in your life because you should know that you are desired by God, and he created you on purpose for a purpose, and that purpose is relationship with him.
Right. So what did Deacon, what did vulnerability look like to you when you were really seeking, like when you found out you were going to be able to be a deacon? Like, I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, would you say that was when the vulnerability was at its highest, or are there other points in your journey?
I think the vulnerability for me became having to learn to be vulnerable when it came to learn to communicate with my wife. Because I mentioned on a previous show that I kept things to myself and wasn't able to talk. Right. So, but now I'm with this other person, and I can't do that. And that was a real issue in our marriage. And so what I had to do, part of it was because something I wasn't used to.
Right.
I never thought is anything I really had to deal with. But when I finally had to deal with it, being able to trust enough to share the deepest parts of who I am with this other person, right? And feel safe doing that. Because women gossip, right? I mean, men gossip too, but I mean, in general, women like to talk about their husband. Oh my goodness, my husband told me this and it was so beautiful, but I don't want anybody else to know that.
Right.
Yeah, when I stood at that altar, put this ring on, that was for you. That's not for anybody else. So, I mean, there are things I believe only a husband and wife should be able to talk about, and especially because women love when men are vulnerable, right? But men see vulnerability as weakness. But look at 2 Corinthians, right? Paul was afflicted with something, and God said to him, my power is made perfect in weakness. It's when I'm weak, it's then that I'm strong. Because it's God's strength, right? It's God's strength. It's not your strength. It's God's strength that gets you through. And so I had to understand that vulnerability, breaking myself and pouring myself out in love was the most masculine thing I could do for my wife.
Yes.
Not just picking up the groceries or help bring them in from the car, but that just like Christ was vulnerable on the cross and that's where his strength came from, my trusting enough to be vulnerable with my wife. And I told her straight up, if you want me to be vulnerable, I can do that because I love you and I trust you, but you cannot be talking about this with other people. And her tendency was, I want to talk about this with other people, not to embarrass her, but she's just so like, And that's the way she processed things. I'm like, you can't process that piece of it because that needs to stay with us,
right?
Or else it's not going to work.
So do you think that the vulnerability, did you always have that type of relationship? I mean, like, I never knew you could even talk to God. Like, just sit down and have a conversation like I'm having with you. And like, even if it's just inside your head going, and not even knowing that he might answer. Did you always know that you could do that? I mean, was it part of your mind? So you had an awareness.
Yeah, I've always had
of having
awareness.
that.
Yes.
But so you processed that, but doing it with another human being was like a stretch.
Yes, very much a stretch. Because I mean, how many people in the world you go that deep with?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's just my spouse, the only one.
Yeah.
I mean, your spouse knows you more intimately than any other, your parents and any other person in the entire world,
true.
other than God.
Other than
right?
God.
So I knew that my wife couldn't fulfill my every need or desire because no spouse could do that.
Right.
You know, your marriage heading for disaster. If you think your spouse can fulfill every need and desire that you have,
happy.
Yeah, they make you happy because that's not
that's the lie.
Remember, marriage is the archetype for the Revelation 19 verse 9, the wedding feast of the Lamb, where Christ, the eternal bridegroom, will be giving life to his bride forever in heaven. That's marriage anticipates that relationship. And so for me to really see marriage as a heavenly reality on earth, I had to learn that gift of vulnerability. Wow. But she had to create a space for me to place that vulnerability. So I would feel not comfortable, because again, remember, you want to take this to the next level, you got to get uncomfortable. You would take things to the next level. So it was uncomfortable, very much uncomfortable for me to do that. But I do it knowing that she created a space where I could feel safe doing that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And in a relationship like that, like building up that trust is so important. But then also having the space to be merciful if someone makes a mistake and keep working on that journey. It takes
years.
Trust. Yeah.
It took years.
But
and we went to therapy and stuff too.
And being uncomfortable. You had to be uncomfortable. You had to be vulnerable. And, Jesus was pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, when you have nails in you and you're hanging there suffocating to death.
Right, when you're suffocating. But even more than that, how uncomfortable do you think he felt when he was sitting there and they were putting the crown of thorns on him and they were taunting him and belittling him and basically bullying him?
It was a mockery of his real kingship.
Of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is also just as, is as much as the crucifixion. The scourging is obvious. I mean, they beat the crap out of him. I mean, you know what I mean? Different saints have said 5,000 to 6,000 blows. I don't even know. I mean, I'm sure he was unrecognizable. And then you have to think about how uncomfortable it must have been for his mother watching her son go through that.
And ultimately, for us, looking back on that story, for us, we get the full picture. We know the things that the people around him didn't know on that day, right?
Yeah.
And we know contextually, like, all that he endured and all that vulnerability opened the doors of heaven for eternity for us, right? And how many times in our lives do we avoid an instance of vulnerability out of a fear for, criticism or a fear of being judged or whatever? And we don't know what gates of heaven we are not letting open, right? Yeah. What interactions are we not having because we're afraid of being judged for saying a certain thing or whatever? What in my own life, it's been a really interesting journey with Awaken, for example, because like we are not the stereotypical Catholic apostolate, especially media apostolate. Like, I was very critical for so many years of, for example, Catholic radio, Catholic television, whatever, because I would see this I would see this obsession with not doing things as effectively as they could be done for a demographic that really needs to be catered to, right? Whether it's the millennials or whatever the other names are.
Ys and Zs.
All that crap. Like we just have these huge swaths. I don't know how to say that word. Swaths of demographics, generations of people that like we're just kind of skipping right over. And we do it in parish ministry. We do it in parish ministry where it's like, okay, we have catechesis for kids until they're confirmed. And then when they are going to get married later in life, we got some stuff for that, but not a lot. And then once they have kids, then they'll come back and we'll do ministry. We have these huge decades of just no ministry whatsoever to these. So anyways, as it pertains to Awaken, and the struggles that I've kind of faced in this question of vulnerability, like I started Awaken with this, for years I'd been critical of like Catholic radio, Catholic TV, where they wouldn't make the right calls, make the right choices, do things the right ways to serve these demographics. And ultimately, I knew this because of inside relationships that I had. Like a lot of it came from a fear of losing donor base, which was all 90 plus years old, but they had the checkbooks, and so in launching Awaken, there was just this initial step of vulnerability of like, I'm going to do something that's risky because the group that I want to serve doesn't have the checkbooks. The group that I want to serve the way that they need to be served, they don't have the checkbooks, but I'm going to do it the way that I see would have helped me and would help my peers and whatever. And what's interesting is now, since having run it now for a couple of years, I've already seen these moments of like, I could so easily get sucked in to everything I've been critical of in these other organizations for so many years. And there's been that temptation already. and it's like, oh, this is tough because we are not fully funded.
Yeah.
And we sure could use the help of being fully funded. But then I would be, so the vulnerability of being authentic to that call to serve in the way in which we feel our hearts being pulled, even if it's unconventional, even if my wife and I were Catholic musicians. But the music we make is not for the people that love Catholic music. We're making music for people that don't want to listen to Catholic music, but then they get brought into Catholic ideals, Catholic principles in the music. And so we're vulnerable in that because we know we're not going to get any love from Catholic circles, and we don't. But the people who do like our music, I literally, one of our songs got shared by a Hollywood celebrity on her Instagram. Like, that's what we're doing. And so, that doesn't mean that we're suddenly rich or anything, but by any means. But what it does mean is like literally what our goal is with that.
To reach the people.
It takes being vulnerable and putting yourself in jeopardy of being ridiculed, being in those positions of not having the type of quote unquote success that you could otherwise or whatever. And as Catholic musicians, yeah, it's tough that we don't get any love from the Catholic world, but I'll take reaching people where they're at any day because that's what matters, Yeah. And so, anyways, that's a very verbose way of just saying, like, in day-to-day life, like when we're at Walmart,
right?
Does the Holy Spirit tug your heart to talk to someone, but you're afraid of looking weird or being ridiculed? Right. Like I try to every time I go to a restaurant, ask the waitress or waiter, like, hey, is there anything in your life we can pray for when we bless the meal? Like just those little things, like being vulnerable.
Nice. That's beautiful.
I've only had a negative reaction once, and it was a pretty negative reaction. But every other time, they toss something up that we can pray for. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
So I just think that there isn't a person, especially a baptized Christian, that the Holy Spirit isn't prompting.
Oh, yeah.
But we just are so trained to listen to the other voice instead. Like, no, you're going to look like an idiot.
Yeah. Or when I something simple like praying the office on the plane.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You got the breviary open and pray in the office. Everybody thinks it's a Bible, But how many times I've had flight attendants say, "Could you say a prayer for me?" Or could you? No, seriously.
That's awesome.
Or someone sitting next, I'm praying a rosary. Something next to you, they're like, they're looking at you, and that kind of thing. And one thing that we can't hide behind with vulnerability is culture. Mm-hmm. You're Cuban, I'm West Indian. And sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, you don't understand our culture. We have machismo. You have to be a man and you have to be tough and hold on." I'm like, shut up. What are you, an idiot? I mean, so this Jesus teaching applies to everyone else except your culture?
Yeah, right.
Jesus didn't die for your culture. He died for everyone. We're all held to the same standard here.
Right. Amen.
So you have to transcend whatever cultural barriers are preventing you from the vulnerability.
Yeah.
So we cannot. Don't want to hear the excuse hide behind culture. And then Jesus didn't hide. He was fully exposed on the cross, fully vulnerable, and he was crucified naked. By the way, it's about vulnerability. I mean, we have the cloth on him now for protect the dignity of our Lord. But if you study crucifixion, back at the time, he was completely naked because not only did Romans want to maximize the pain, they want to maximize the embarrassment. Yeah. They want to strip you of all dignity, of all your humanity. Yeah. That's exactly what they were doing. And so,
exactly what
we have to be naked in a sense, right? Genesis chapter 2, the last line of Genesis 2, naked and not ashamed. Yeah. You have to get back to that again.
And then the other thing I'm going to talk about within the vulnerability thing is the backside, the other side of that. I had an experience. I'm not going to name names or places or whatever, but I had an experience where, for some unknown reason, I happened to be online one night very late, and my computer rang. And I'd never taken a video call before, so I had no idea what was going on. And I answered the video call, and it was someone that I loved very much, that had a shotgun in one hand, and a bullet in the other, and a casing in the other. And they called to tell me that they loved me and to say goodbye. And this was in the beginning of my journey, the very beginning of my journey. I've been since the call, probably about a year and a half into it. but I was still not really knowing what was going on and what was happening, and I didn't really understand my call completely. It was after I'd met you, but it was hard. And I can remember at that exact moment just bowing my head and realizing for the very first time in my life that I had nothing, that nothing was mine, that the person that was staring at me with going to, end their life, everything that I owned, everything that I thought I had, all my, quote unquote fame and fortune, or, whatever that looks like, my cars, my jewelry, my house, my animals, my children, that absolutely none of that was mine, myself. It was all a gift from my Creator. And that there was nothing I could do at that moment other than turn it all over to God and say, you're up. I said, I'm out. I have nothing. I had absolutely nothing. And that was a vulnerability that was really difficult to go through. Mm-hmm. Because then I had to start taking a really deep dive into what that looked like. Because I didn't have anything. I had nothing. I knew that God loved me, and I was at the beginning of my journey, to where it's a long journey. It's been a really long journey. But I still didn't have any knowledge that was useful per se, other than, I'd learned how to say the rosary. So I had the rosary, and I'd learned to go to Mass every day. I try to go to Mass every day. I'd learned about adoration because I'd never been to adoration in my life. And I learned that in order to reconcile not having anything that was mine, I had to trust something that I couldn't see. And I had to trust that which I couldn't see, because that's what they say faith is, right? What's the Bible verse that says that? I'm not a theologian, so it's not going to happen on my dime. But, what is it? Faith is things not seen?
Yes, St. Paul.
St. Paul said that. I mean, and, you look at St. Paul and talk about vulnerable. I mean, God knew the only way he was going to get to him, was to blind him completely. So he was basically, what happens if you're blinded instantaneously? You become helpless. Completely helpless. Yeah. And in the first century, can you imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had to become blinded to the ways of the world so he could see Christ.
Correct.
And
basically that's what it looked like to me, because when that person did that.
Did they actually kill themselves?
No, they did not. Okay. By the grace of God, they did not. And, I thank God every day for that, because that's hard. But, for me, on the outside looking in, I had to know that. And the only way God knew that he would get me to get out of my ego and my pride and look at, and it isn't that you run around thinking, oh, look at my car, look at my house. Oh, I've got nice clothes. Oh, I've got this, I've got that. My kids went to school here. They did that. You know what I mean? We live in that world. We live in a material, secular world. So we can get wrapped around the axle in that pretty quick. And I tell you, person staring at you on a computer screen with a shotgun in their hand and a bullet in the other one telling you goodbye, you learn pretty darn quick that none of that crap means a thing.
Yeah, that's heavy.
And the only thing that means anything is God.
Wow, that's deep.
So, in our own lives, viewers, listeners, I think maybe something to reflect on is what are the ways in which you need to allow yourself to be more vulnerable, release some of the control, release some of the pretense. We've all had to do that, and I still, to this day, every day, me to do that. And yeah, I think that's a huge factor in the journey.
One thing that's helped me is this is the surrender novena.
Oh,
There's like a zillion novenas out there, right? But there's this one novena that God revealed this novena to this guy who's on his way to sainthood, and these the 9 days of novena, 9 reflections that God revealed to him. And it was my archbishop actually that gave me a copy of it. I've never heard of the Surrender Novena, and I got to day 9. I start over with day 1. I've been praying it constantly now for months.
Oh, wow.
Every night I take a different day, but at the end of that prayer, it says, "Lord Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything."
Wow.
That's what you got to do.
Yeah, Lord Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything.
Yeah.
That's the trust. That's the vulnerability. That's, because even when David fought Goliath, he said, "You come to me with sword and scabbard and spear. I come to you in the name of the Lord, of the God of the armies of Israel." Right?
Best.
And what do we say at every Mass? Blessed is he who
comes in the name of the Lord.
So we say the same thing at every Mass that David said to Goliath. That's
our cry. That's the cry.
That's the
David.
battle. That's the battle cry.
That's the battle cry.
So once we have that trust, then David understood that God fights with and for him.
Wow.
That in that vulnerability, he's never alone.
That's
and
amazing.
once we come to understand that, we surrender everything over to God. Then we realize we're not alone.
Preach, baby.
Woo-hoo.
That's a solid note to end on.
It's a very good note.
super
Y'all got to
good.
come back for more, though, because we got lots. We got so much. All right. You going to take us out?
Yeah. So in the meantime, until you get to join us again, you can see previous episodes of the show, prodigalife.com. You can see we'll also have our patron page there as well, the Light Bearers We Will Serve, so you can support the show. And until next time, may God bless you abundantly with his grace and his love.
Amen.
Amen.